Vice President of Membership for the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. Thank you so much for being here to support Enlighten. As everybody's come in, I think you've been muted on entry. We're going to ask everybody to stay muted throughout the course of kind of presentation part, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. So a couple of things that you can do for your Q&A, you can either type your question into the chat box, and then the events team will help me keep track and ask that for you, or you can go next to your name or the participants list and do a hand raise, and then we can unmute you and you can ask your question aloud. So we'll keep you on mute until it's time for Q&A to keep the background noise down. We encourage everybody to use the chat function, so it's cool to see everybody doing that in there right now. I think a lot of us are hungry for networking and to see our friends, and that's one of the best ways that we can do that in this setting. We encourage you to have questions at the end, and so we're going to try to make as much time for that as we possibly can. Before we start to talk to our panelists, I want to thank Mass Mutual, our amazing partners for Enlighten. They helped us launch this program about 2 years ago. In their office at 13th and Walker, and they made this move to help support us in doing this online, so we couldn't be more thankful for them. You know, before Oklahoma was even a state, Mass Mutual had an agency here guiding people and helping them make plans for their future. During this really uncertain time in our lives, it kind of seems more important than ever to have a stable listening ear to help guide us on life insurance and investments and business continuation plans. If any of that kind of stuff is on your mind and you're looking for someone to talk to who can help support you through this, you can go to oklahoma.massmutual.com, and they're a great resource and a great partner to the Chamber, so thank you for supporting Enlighten. So you're here to hear from some really smart folks today. We have 4 different superintendents from districts here in the Metro, and we have a 5th panelist who is a labor and employment attorney that will help us think through what we need to be doing as employers and managers in supporting our teams as we go through this back to school stuff. Again, we'll have questions at the end. Each speaker is going to have about 5 to 7 minutes to speak, so I'm going to keep them on a timer. I'm feeling a little anxious about how I'm going to stop all these authority figures when they're going, so y'all help me send the right energy for that, because the questions are going to be really important today. This is the order that they're going to kind of go in, so let me tell you. First, we have Superintendent of Oklahoma City Public Schools, Superintendent Towne McDaniel. He was named superintendent in July of 18, 2 years here. Also in 2018, he was named the Oklahoma Superintendent of the Year by the Cooperative Council for Oklahoma School Administration. Then we also have the superintendent from Millwood Schools, Cecilia Robinson Woods. She was the first superintendent on today, so I think that tells us something. She is in her 8th year at Millwood, and under her leadership, Millwood Public Schools has become one of the first charter conversion schools in the state. Joining us next, after a visit to the emergency room today, is Yukon Public School Superintendent Jason Simeroth, who was named superintendent in May of 2014. The Yukon district has since been named a top workplace in Oklahoma 3 years in a row. To round out the list of superintendents, we have Edmond Public School Superintendent Bret, who's been serving in the district since 2015. In 2018, the Oklahoma Association of School Administrators named him the Region 7 Superintendent of the Year. Lastly, we have Courtney, who is a labor and employment attorney at McAfee Taft. Her practice focuses on state and federal labor laws, and she counsels and trains management and HR professionals on best practices for reducing risk, avoiding litigation, and maintaining a productive workforce. Welcome to all of our panelists. I'm going to get my little timer set, and I think we're ready to start with Superintendent McDaniel.
Ready, go. 5 minutes. All right, here we go. Let me talk really fast. First of all, Sunny, you do a fabulous job. It's good to see you. Cecilia, are you giving me hand gestures? It's great to share the stage, the virtual stage with Cecilia and Bret and Jason. You know, we signed up for this as superintendents. We're problem solvers. This is a different problem, certainly, but we signed up to be problem solvers. And so that's what we're doing with our boards of education. You know, as I think about pandemic and virtual and hybrid, our hearts go out to our teachers and our families, and particularly our students. They did not sign up for this. While we may have as leaders, and we're going to work through the problem solving to the best of our ability, our parents and our other caregivers are in a bind right now. Whether we are virtual 100% like we are, or hybrid, we have parents and caregivers, and I know you watching are some of these parents and caregivers who, by our decision making, we put you in a tough spot. You know, do I go to work? Do I stay home and take care of my kids? What does that look like? And so for that, you know, my apologies to you for this position. In Oklahoma City Public Schools, and I think I would probably speak for all of us, we had to take a look at our unique circumstances and make decisions that we felt were the best, safest decisions for our communities. So while I have the utmost respect for every other leader in every other district, what they are doing in their community may not fit for me. We've got to listen to our public health officials and look at our data and look at our survey results and responses, and we have to make a decision that we can live with, that is best, safest for us. So in Oklahoma City, we're going 100% virtual out of the gate. First day is August 31st. We are still working on the recommendation from the State Department that even in a virtual setting, try and get those children with the greatest needs in some sort of a face-to-face environment. So we're looking at special ed kids, and we're looking at our English learner kids, and we're looking at extracurriculars kind of under a different lens. And how can we meet needs under a virtual setting and keep everybody the safest that we can keep them? And so a lot of things moving around right now. In our virtual setting, we have two options for kids. One is a remote learning option, which is as close to a face-to-face as we can get. Kids log in together. They have a teacher that's assigned to them, and they work through the school day together virtually. We have an E3 option, which is a front-loaded, self-paced. If I'm a kid, I can log in at 10 o'clock at night and work on my lessons. So very different options, but both virtual and both with OKCPS teachers. And so we like that. And Sonny, you're going to have to cut me off because I'm just rolling here. But the last thing I'll say is just the opportunity we had in Oklahoma City to go to a one-to-one initiative where every single student gets a device. And if they don't have connectivity, they get a hotspot. And so we're trying to set them up to succeed. And that's kind of where we are right now. Look forward to some questions here in just a little bit.
Guys, dead on. Thank you so much. That was perfect timing. Yes, Superintendent McDaniel sets the tone. Superintendent Robinson Woods looks ready to take it next.
All righty. Thank you for having me today. And I think what Sean said about, you know, we signed up for this in regards to leadership, and this is what we do, is make decisions and make tough decisions. The difference in this situation is just about every decision is a lose-lose. We don't really have good decisions for families right now. We just don't. And so we are erring on the side of safety for our community. And as you all know, every community looks different. For those of you that don't know where Millwood is, Oklahoma City totally encloses us on every single border. We are right smack, almost dab in the middle of Oklahoma City public schools. And we service about 1,000 kids. And we service primarily the most historically Black zip code in the state. And because of the nuances with COVID-19 and how it disproportionately affects people of color, our sensitivities are more heightened because we don't want to be the source of super spreading in an area that hasn't even opened churches back up. And so a lot of that went into our planning and what we needed to do to meet the needs of our community. And so our original plan, we never, since the beginning of this, we started planning in June and July, we were always going to open up only servicing 20% of our kids a day. With the thought that If we brought kids in small groups at a time, we could teach them how to behave and interact safely, and then scaffold kind of up to hopefully larger attendance. As the summer progressed, it became clear that the safest option was for us to switch to a pretty much totally virtual option. We are still holding out for high needs kids, which were 96% free and reduced lunch. And so that's quite a few kids for us. But we are holding out that special education kids will still come into school and receive services. We're also looking at our transition grades, because for us, that's the biggest deal. And so kids that are in preschool, kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade, we're trying to get some face-to-face at some point every month so that those kids have an opportunity to stay engaged live. We're also going to meet with every single family, all 1,000 of our families, the week of August 17th, and they will have an hour-long conversation with their teacher where they'll be able to get devices. We will be able to understand how the parent is going to support the learning of that child. So if they work at night, then we know that we've got to set up something for them to be able to work with their kids in the day. If they work during the day, then we know we have to set something at night. And so we're going to work through with every family what they need, because we don't have the ability, like in Oklahoma City, to offer a totally virtual option and then a teacher-led virtual option. We don't have that ability. And so we're going to have to build relationships with families and just work around their needs. Once again, we're doing all in the name of safety and just trying to make sure that we can meet the needs of our families and keep our staff safe. So that's Millwood.
Y'all are no muss, no fuss. I can tell where these superintendents are at right now. They're trying to take care of business and don't have time to mess around. So I appreciate that. Next, we've got Superintendent Simeroth. I don't know if you want to say anything about the reference MA2 being in the emergency room or not, but I just said it again, so maybe you should. Welcome. I'm glad you made it.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, hopefully we can find some time to do something we enjoy, and I enjoy playing with my animal, my dog, until last night when she tried to rip my thumb off my hand. So that's where I was, but it's all good. We're all good. You're blessed to have Robert and Sean and Cecilia talk to you today, and I'm just honored to be a part of that because they're just phenomenal leaders and people. So Yukon, we are we change as we have to, just like everybody else. And I think there was a story on Channel 9 last night where that was emphasized, because it started off with Sean talking about, and this was, what did they do that? About a week and a half ago, I think they did the actual interviews. He was virtual. At that time, we were looking at coming back full, maybe an A-B schedule. And between then and the time it aired, we changed. We changed because of the circumstances. We changed because of the threat to our kids. We changed because of the threat to our teachers. I can tell you, as of today alone, we've had probably 4 reports of either possible exposure or possible COVID results from staff. And that just shows you the roller coaster that we are on as school districts. And so, when we talk about how it affects you as business people, your parents, our parents, your employees are going to be hugely affected by how they are going to respond to the needs of their families when we aren't able to put them in school. If there are districts, and like Sean said, and everybody else, we vary in our approaches. But one thing that we don't vary is the fact that we love kids, and we're going to take their safety and our staff safety into account when we make decisions. So the people are in school, it could be a roller coaster. You could be in for 10 days and then have an outbreak and be shut down for 14, and then come back in and then shut down for another 14. Those are some of the things that we look at when we try to make the decision on how we're going to progress. And there's a lot of inequity in that as well. We're not a full, but we're about a 50% free and reduced in Yukon at this point. So we have to take care of everybody. We're doing a very similar thing to Cecilia, that we're going to allow our pre-K through 6th grade to come in one day in a week or so and pick up their device, spend about 40 minutes with their teacher in groups of 5, so they can have that face-to-face, have that relationship semi-built, not like we would every day in a normal setting, but they'll get to know that teacher that they're going to be online with in our continual learning process. We have the 100% virtual option, much the same as Sean. It's a self-paced kind of opportunity. I think the decisions that we're faced with, and like Sean and Cecilia said, and Robert will echo, we signed up for this. We signed up to make the hard decisions. These keep us up at night because we like to problem solve, like I'm sure everybody else here does. There's no solution to this problem. It's ever changing. One solution comes up with 6 answers, and we try to do the best we can for our kids and to help them learn this year. And so for everybody here, I would say that last year in the spring was a mess. It was a crisis situation, but our public schools had just busted it to prepare this year to make sure your kids learn and they continue learning throughout the year, no matter where they are. And so it's been quite a task. It's one we learned from. It's one that I pray that we'll never have to face again. But public educators are the people that you want in this situation because we know how to do the things in a heartbeat that we've never done before. That was a little bit of preaching, but that's okay. I'm going to stop now and let Robert take over.
Well said, and this is a perfect forum for it. So thank you so much for saying that. Yes, so now on to Superintendent Towne. I think you may still be muted. Yep, still muted.
You're muted, Bret.
We could also unmute you if we need to. Yes, here we go.
Got it.
Superintendent Towne.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Sonny, thanks for hosting this. Drew Dugan, thanks for inviting me. We've worked on several projects through the year. Edmond is a little bit different. We chose to go with an A-B blended model, or a hybrid as it's mentioned sometimes. We polled our parents back in June, and we had some very definitive information that 65% of them wanted to start school face-to-face. If we weren't able to do that, then about 90% said have a blended model before you would go to a full virtual. And during the course of the summer, we really determined that social distancing was not an option. Mask, we were one of the first school districts to say we will mask and we will require mask and under any and all circumstances. But the social distancing aspect in large classrooms, it went from 18 to 38 in some of the high school classes, not counting a band or a vocal or athletics. It just made it an untenable situation. So a blended model is kind of like walking down the middle of the highway and everyone's hitting you on both sides, because you really have made about 2/3 of the people upset. A third, kind of understand it in the middle, but we have to do what we feel is right and correct. We do feel like we can safely have school in these smaller settings and then provide the virtual education the 3 days of the week. So in an AB model, half the students are going to school on Monday and Tuesday, the other half on Thursday and Friday, and those other 3 days are virtual days. And what we're asking our teachers to do is to use their virtual coursework every day so that they get used to it, and then the students that are even in the class are used to the virtual format, and we're using Canvas as a platform. And we were in a very good situation that we were only about 200 devices short of having a device for every student once we had made our spring order anyway. So our high school students have been used to this, our high school teachers have, our elementary hasn't, and that's where we focused our training this year. Many hours of online virtual before we started the face-to-face Canvas training and Canvas lesson building. Only about 500 of our students at one point were not connected, and we've used our CARES Act money and some grants to fill that void. So we feel like we'll be able to reach all of our students and reach them rather quickly. And it's unique. Virtual enrollment this year, virtual tours by the principal of the school for new parents, and virtual teachers showing their students in their classroom everything, how it's going to function, what's going to go on, and then we're going to have a face-to-face with all of our elementary. So again, it's a new era. We feel like pioneers, but we also take this very seriously, trying to balance providing a quality education and safety at the same time for students and for our employees.
Thank you for echoing that, Superintendent Towne. So that concludes our kind of briefing from our superintendents. And now, next up, we've got Courtney Brew from McAfee Taft. Courtney?
Hi, so all of those different scenarios that we just heard these superintendents describe for us, Congress acted pretty quickly, and we have a new law now called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That law is intended to address all of these scenarios. So as an employer out there, you may have employees that are dealing with the scenarios like we just heard described, or different scenarios. Scenarios will change. We know that going forward, at least for the remainder of the year. I think it's pretty confident. I can be pretty confident and say that people are going to have to react and react quickly. That's what the Families First law is intended to do. And that's what employers have to do when they're administering the new benefits under the law. Those new benefits, there are two. The first is a paid sick leave. That is available to any of your employees, regardless of how long they've been with you, regardless of how many hours they work per week. They are entitled to take up to 2 weeks of leave paid at 2/3 of their salary, up to $200 a day, in order to care for a student who is either below the age of 18 or a child that is above the age of 18 but incapable of self-care because of a school closure. So we're talking 2 weeks of at least partially paid leave. At that point, there's another benefit that kicks in. It's the expanded emergency FMLA. And that provides up to another 10 weeks of partially paid leave for this exact reason, for a working parent that has to respond to the fact that a school is closed and they now have a child in the home that they have to take care of, that they may not be able to have anywhere else because of daycare or childcare or school closures. So those are two brand new benefits. I'll tell you, in practice, what I have seen is that, at least in the Tulsa area, mid-March, people sort of dispersed, right? I mean, workplaces shut down, people scrambled, they went remote. And so we've seen a lot of instances where these benefits have not been very tightly administered yet. That's okay. If you're an employer and you feel uncomfortable right now because you haven't done any administration of these benefits, you are fine. That means that those benefits are still there. They went into effect April the 1st, and they're scheduled to stay into effect through the end of the year, December 31st. But you need to start administering them now, which means you need to give notice of them now. And you need to pick a date. And this is going to feel arbitrary, but you need to pick a date and let your employees know that on this date, we're going to start administering these benefits. This is what they are. This is who you talk to request them. And then as you administer these, you've got to be flexible. You can't dig in your heels because you feel like there's a family member that should be available to take care of a child. You can't dig in your heels because for 2 weeks there was an arrangement and then suddenly that arrangement disappeared and now an employee is asking for leave. These leave benefits are available intermittently if you agree. So you can be as creative as you want. The new guidance that we got under the law also indicates that we're free to be flexible and to have a dialogue with our employees about when can you work. So I've got a couple of clients that had people come to them and say, you know what, I've got a kid in the house, I'm helping with distance learning, but my husband comes home at about 5 o'clock, and so I can probably do some work in between the hours of 5 and 9, and that's about what I can do right now. And trust me, you don't want to be the employer that is unreasonable or inflexible here. That is not the intent. But you do need to administer these benefits. And we've gotten some great guidance from the Wage and Hour Division. And one thing that was unclear to people is, look, if I'm in a school district, I have kids in a school district and we've gone distance learning or we've gone virtual learning, does that mean that that school is closed and I'm entitled to take benefits under these new 2 leave entitlements? And the answer to that is yes. So if children are not being allowed in the door of the school, that school is closed even though learning continues in a virtual environment. We know that for a fact. And to the extent that we go to some of these sort of staggered schedules, the days that a particular child is not allowed to go into that school is closed. Again, calling to the need for intermittent benefits. We've also gotten some guidance from the Wage and Hour Division that, what if in the past, we've made it all the way through the summer now, an employee hasn't requested this leave, but now all of a sudden they are, and that makes me skeptical or suspicious. Do I have to allow the benefits? Yes. Employees get to change their mind. I'm a working parent. This is tough, right? I mean, this is unprecedented and difficult, and people are really scrambling. The last 3-4 months have been wild for a lot of workers out there. And so, yes, you have to allow people to try something on, and if it doesn't work, to try another situation. So be flexible as you go forward, and be sure that you don't want to be the test case, right? You don't want to be the first employer out there that is not allowing these benefits, which, heads up, there is no administrative exhaustion requirement. So we're already seeing a wave of lawsuits challenging denial of these benefits or failure to administer these benefits. So that's a real risk. Know the benefits that are allowed and administer those for your workforce. Some advice that I typically give is be human. Be human. This is tough. This is new. So help your employees, listen to your employees, be flexible with your employees.
Courtney, that is so valuable and such a practical way to think about this complex thing. Thank you so much for what you shared. And thanks to everybody for getting us started and being relatively brief, because we have gotten a slew of questions already. A lot have been coming in the chat box, and the superintendents weren't able to sit there and wait until the Q&A. They hopped in and started answering them. But I am going to ask some of those same questions again in case folks weren't watching the chat and may want to hear some of these answers. So the first question that we got from Claudia San Pedro to Dr. McDaniel: have you considered prioritizing grades that could come back to in-person school first, such as prioritizing elementary first, then middle, then high school? Once numbers decrease, could you transition to the model that Edmond is using? Dr. McDaniel?
Yes, and we explored the model that Edmond is using. We think it's an exceptional model, and we've talked about the little ones, the pre-KK in particular, along with kids that are on IEPs, particularly those who are in self-contained classrooms, the severe and profound kids who really need our in-person instruction. So we believe as the circumstances change favorably, that we can incrementally begin bringing kids back in that way. So we've looked at it, we like it, and we have plans to be able to do so.
Excellent, thank you. Here is a question from Shannon Vargles for all the superintendents. How long do you anticipate being online? When COVID numbers start to decline, how quickly can you pivot to in-person school? Who would like to take that first?
I'll start with that one. That's one of the strengths of an AB model. You can pivot either way depending upon the cases and the metric. We chose to go with the State Department of Health, State Department of Education color-coded system. There are 3 or 4 systems out there. They all have different metrics on when you should do this, when you should trigger that. The key that we've heard time and time again is choose one, follow that, wear masks, social distance, and you'll probably be where you need to be. But we're going to have to wait either way, because we don't want parents having to jump back and forth for daycare or make plans. So I think as long as when we reach a 3-week descending or ascending trend line, that's when we will pull the trigger, just to make sure that what we're going to do is sustainable for a while.
Thank you. Other answers?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and chime in. The decisions that we've made in trying to plan out for the 9 weeks really was made to allow families an opportunity to find care. It would be really hard for us to say we're going to do this 1 week and do it the next week. So we are making decisions with families in mind. Obviously, if you are in a totally virtual environment and you have to pivot, for families, they will be happy to be able to, to start back up. But those decisions made out that far in advance, we all understand that, as Dr. Towne said, if there starts to be a decline in cases, then we can start to look at things a little differently. but we had to go ahead and project out as far as we could to allow for families to make plans, because we understand everybody can't, plan last minute for care for kids.
Thank you. Other remarks on that topic?
So I think the data point was I may be jumping, but it kind of plays in. There are two really good sources. One of them is our state COVID alert map. The other is the global pandemic map. They're both good, but there's some stark differences. The global pandemic map is updated daily with cases per 100,000, where our state map is updated weekly. We're using a combination of those two in our rubric to decide when we start that process to come back.
Thank you so much for those thoughtful answers. I've got a question that came to me directly as a private chat message, which reminds me to say, if you would like to have a question asked anonymously, you can message it directly to me and I'll watch for those and ask those. So this is a question for Courtney. Please repeat the names of the pieces of legislation that you referred to.
Sure, it's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It is referred to as the FFCRA, and information about that law is available at dol.gov.
Excellent, thank you so much. This is a question from Micah James for the superintendent. I'm very concerned about the exposure to our students and our teachers due to the large amount of variables that can't be controlled. The schools can only do so much. What data is guiding you on making the decisions? And it sounds like we answered some of that in the data point question, but other things you'd like to share there?
I think all of us are going, doing an extensive amount of training around how to stay safe, even for the adults, how to socially distance, washing your hands, using the CDC guidelines. Those guidelines are out there for a reason. They're out there to tell us how to safely interact with this. So we're spending a lot of time training the adults on how to train the children how to interact. We understand that we cannot control what people bring into the schools, but we can somewhat control how we respond to it. So training teachers how to interact safely is our most important training really going on right now in our districts.
So I want to just add to that. That's really well put, Cecilia. There's data like transmission rates and positivity rates and hospitalizations, and we certainly track all of that. But there's other data like how many of our employees right now, as they're returning to work, are following CDC guidelines. And we track that, and we try and correct that, and we try and instill some accountability into that. There's anecdotal data that we receive all the time about outside of the schoolhouse. What we think, what I think, I won't speak for anybody else, is the more seriously we take this pandemic and CDC guidelines outside of the schoolhouse, the better chance we have to get our kids back inside the schoolhouse. So as our community is taking this seriously, you're giving us a better chance to get back into a setting that makes the most sense, which is kids and teachers together in a classroom in a school. So there's all kinds of data that we track. It's not just the rates, the positivity rates, it's how are we handling the pandemic. And I want to just say this, not to overdo this, but what's really important to us as school people is taking care of the community at large. And so, we talked earlier about, we put our parents and our caregivers in a bind. Do I go to work? Do I stay home and take care of my child? So the more flexibility that we can have as a community, as an employer, the better off we're all going to be. So I would just ask that we consider those things. And I know many are being very flexible with employees, so that we don't put parents and caregivers into that position where they're likely to lose a job because we're not having school and they have to stay home. So just some things to think about in that regard.
Well said. Thank you, Dr. McDaniel. This next question is for Courtney. Does the benefits from the legislation that you mentioned earlier, Does that apply to parents responsible for older dependents that require care also?
So it does. The law itself is drafted so that it applies to anyone that has to care for someone who is either 18, below the age of 18, or above the age of 18, but incapable of self-care. And the benefits are triggered when the typical care arrangement for that person has been altered for a COVID-related reason. So a care facility has been closed, a school has been closed, a child care provider is no longer available. That's the situations where the benefits may come into play.
Thank you, that's very helpful. This is a question from Brad Thompson to Superintendent Towne. With a split schedule, it seems like a great deal of additional work on our teachers managing a group of students in the class and virtually. How are you supporting the teachers in this new environment?
That's a great question. That's one of the reasons why we're asking for, as teachers formulate their lessons and their lesson plans, that they use the Canvas content management system so that each lesson is a virtual lesson, whether it takes place in the classroom that day or it's a virtual lesson. We're also providing the middle of the week is Wednesday, where teachers get to build those lessons and they can build them collaboratively. For example, fourth grade in a school, we have one teacher will do the math lessons for everybody for that week. You have one that'll do English, one that will do history, one will do social studies. So essentially, you may be cutting down some of the work that they're doing by specializing it and then pushing it out to all that grade level at that school. We're also providing counseling, online counseling. We've broken loose for our virtual students this year. And when we have 4,000 students that are on a different path, virtual Edmond, and they're learning on different systems, Apex at the secondary level, Edgenuity at the elementary. Those are typical virtual learning models where anything else that we have is going to, and they're monitored and taught by our Edmond teachers, but in the other model, those are the classroom teachers that are assigned to those students. So we want to give them supports. We want to start slow and ramp this up as we go along.
Thank you. This is a question from Erin Engelkey to all of the superintendents. For those schools with a virtual model, how are you planning to support the mental health needs of the students when your partners can't come into the school? Would someone like to take that first?
Sure, I don't mind jumping on first. We actually have had this conversation many times, and apart from the whole child nutrition piece, which is, that's a huge piece, and I know that's another question you'll get to later. So we, in our virtual setting, in our continuous learning plan, we have enabled counselors to be a part of that. So they are going to be producing some grade level appropriate social emotional learning type of lessons to help to help the parents and help the kids go through some of the things that they may encounter along the way, whether it's separation, anxiety, or whatever that may be. And so we're able to use the fact that we have our people working with our kids in that setting to monitor that as well, because, teachers pick up on cues that other people might not. And so by being able to have that face-to-face cue, they can make references back to the DHS if they feel that something's going on. I mean, that's a law. It's not only a legal law, it's a moral law in our opinion. But we're doing that as well with all of our councils. We'll have some group sessions with our intermediate and high school counselors if the students need to log in and have some of those opportunities. We have student assistance programs that are available for our students and our parents if they have drug and alcohol problems, they have suicide thought, things like that. We're still making those options available via technology. So we're going to be in their homes. We're going to be with those kids and doing our best to meet those needs as well. And there are obviously other things that will be going on also.
I would just add to Jason's response, and I see that Trina and Claudia both asked questions kind of around this. In our learning, whether it's the remote learning or the complete virtual learning, we have criteria that a kid has to live up to in order to be present. So even though they're not in the brick and mortar, they have to log in, they have to meet criteria in order to be present for that day. So we will have the opportunity to track our kids. And if we see either in the remote setting where a teacher has a roster, if we see kids are not logging in, kids are not showing up in the remote setting, we know then that we need to reach out. We get social workers involved, counselors involved, and even pay visits to homes as needed. Likewise, in the virtual setting, we also can track criteria. So we know when kids have been in to work on lessons, if we see that there's been a break or that it's like an attendance issue in the schoolhouse. It red flags, and then we can pursue those kids and those families to make sure everything's safe. So we've got some controls in place at all of our districts that will allow us to the best of our ability to take care of our kids in that way.
And I just want to add to what Sean said, we are putting something similar in place. And some of the questions that have come to me from people outside of school systems are, well, what are all those people going to do all day that say don't teach a class, right? The bus drivers, the cafeteria workers. These are some of the people for us that we're using to do exactly what Sean was talking about, is tracking attendance, making a home visit if necessary, so that every kid that is enrolled with us fulfills their end of responsibility for logging on regularly or completing assignments so that they can meet the criteria for attendance. And so more than ever, honestly, right now, none of my other colleagues have said this, but funding is important because we have added the added burden, especially if you look at a model like Edmond. Those teachers are having to manage who's ever at home and might have a question and the kids in front of them at the same time. And so extra hands have never been more important in schools because we're juggling a lot trying to make sure that we meet the needs of everybody.
Thank you. Here's a question that came to me, Drew, or Superintendent Towne, did you have remarks on that question? Oh, you're muted. I think you unmuted and then I called on you. Which question?
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, some of these programs are automatic. The one that we're using for a virtual school, if a student doesn't log in, it notifies us. But as everyone said, there'll be check-ins for students. There'll be assignments that are supposed to be made, and if they're not, that's that disengagement that we want everyone to react to. I think everyone is going to learn as we go on this, and we'll look at our best practices. And one thing that we do as superintendents is we collaborate a lot. We pull best practices in whether it's athletics or academics or operations, and we will learn this, and we'll cue this in as we go along and fine tune it. So it won't be as good on the first day as it will be the last day, but I know we are learning organizations, and we will learn how to make this as good as it can be.
Thank you. This is another question for all the superintendents. For those that are providing free meal pickups for students, will that service continue during virtual and blended learning formats? How will that work?
It's different for, well, first of all, let me apologize to Bret because he talked about collaboration. A while ago, I called him Robert. I was literally on the phone with Robert Romines from Moore in a text conversation. And Cecilia, thank you. You called me out on that.
You're good.
But yeah, it's like for us, we have the mix of free and reduced and paid lunches. We're still going to provide meals. The difference is the waivers from last year where everybody eats free, regardless of the economic status, is not in effect currently. So that poses some logistical issues. We'll have to have some specific sites where they can come pick up, or maybe have some delivery sites with our bus drivers as we continue to utilize our support staff. So we'll continue to provide that. We would love to have them make that waiver again for the next school year. so that we can just go all out and not have to worry about it, because we're afraid. I think Sean mentioned a while ago, there may be some people that don't come and get meals for a variety of reasons. There may be people that are eligible for this free and reduced that don't apply, and then when they find out that they have to pay, they don't come and get fed. We want to feed everybody, regardless. So that waiver would be nice, but different districts have to make different approaches so that we can solve the logistical issues of it. But gosh, people need to eat. It's just fundamental that schools do that, and we need that help. So if you guys have any contacts with your congressmen or senators, that'd be awesome if you could throw that out there to them.
Thank you for saying that. This was a great place to bring that up. I've seen a couple of different, some questions and some just remarks from groups that help with free books or free school supplies for students. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those needs look like as kids are working in these different platforms right now?
Well, I think, you know, in our case, in the AB hybrid, they're still as needed as they ever were. And I would hope that if you were in a full virtual setting, still those students are going to have some needs at home. And given the chance that we could be back, I hope that we're back face to face at some point. They'll have those supplies that they need to, that they could almost instantaneously go back into the classroom and be successful rather than to have to wait for that. But we continue to see people step up, institutions step up to help schools, whether it's a church or whether it's our cities or individuals. It's the Oklahoma standard that we're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it well. And I continue to see it day after day, and I'm never surprised anymore when it happens.
So the next question I have goes to the point of people who are looking to help. And then I've got another question for all the superintendents. I would love to take one more question for Courtney before we close out questions. I think it's a great opportunity to have her expertise here. So if somebody's got one for her, I'd love to take that before we're done. But I've gotten a question in the chat window about, will there be any kind of fund set up for people to contribute to kids that need to get food through school? Is there a way that we could go someplace to contribute? Are there nonprofits that you work with in the community that we should be giving to, or is there a way to give directly to the schools?
So I believe that almost every district was willing to take your money. I think Cecilia said that a while ago. There are, if you are talking about a specific district, yeah, you can write a check to the district's child nutrition fund to cover unpaid debts or things like that. I mean, for us last year, we ended the year with about $40,000, $40,000 to $50,000 debt from unpaid lunches, which is, it's not unusual for that to happen in districts to have unpaid lunches, but you know, any recovery of that cost would absolutely help us. And we partner with Oklahoma Food Bank and the Food Pantry for students already that can't afford. We have backpack program. So contributing to those organizations ultimately helps contribute to our kids as well.
Thank you. Good answer. Any other thoughts on that?
I think Robert's right. Jason's right. Sorry about that.
Well played, Bret. Well played.
So we do have, even in Edmond, we have students who need meals, students who are in poverty. We partner with the food bank with backpacks and such, and even during this time, it's really needed to stretch those resources and to allow those students to have meal security over the weekends and long during the week. So I'm a big fan of the food bank, and that's where my money goes when I give to that cause.
Thank you. They'll be glad to hear that too, I think. So the last question I've got for superintendents is, for those who partner with one of our career tech schools here in the metro, how are you working with them right now to make sure that instruction stays seamless and also safe?
Well, thankfully we have Aaron Collins, and he's doing a great job. So
Yes.
Actually, Metro Tech is going back live for Sean and I. And so those kids will continue to attend Metro Tech and whatever their half-day scenarios are live in person, because they're opened up for fully for class starting next Thursday.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's the same for our Canadian Valley Tech Centers. They're starting on the 13th, and they're starting back live, but we're going to continue to provide transportation for our kids that don't drive or need to get there from Yukon.
That's the same with us and Francis Tuttle. Transportation we'll be providing, and then many of our Francis Tuttle students have always had a sort of a hybrid anyway, that getting back and forth between high schools and Francis Tuttle, they may have been taking a virtual class already just to make sure that they could get to both places and do what they needed to do. So it's really business as usual with career techs.
Excellent. And to be clear, Superintendent Collins did not ask that question to elicit a shout out. So I want to put that out there for him. Okay, we did not get another question for Courtney in the chat, but I would like to ask Courtney, I think you're such a great resource and you've added so much to the conversation. What are the questions that you're getting the most from your clients, or what are the things that those of us as managers and employers aren't thinking about that need to be on our minds right now?
I think the two biggest questions I'm getting, the first is, what about the situation where a school is open, so kids are allowed to go in and receive in-person instruction, but a parent is just not willing to send them, just has concerns, just feels more comfortable keeping the child at home? Are benefits available in that situation? And the answer is a very clear no. If the facility is not closed, then benefits are not available. I think the second most common question I'm getting is just it's just a consequence of how everything happened and how quickly everything happened, and that is, we haven't done it yet. What do we do now? And my advice truly is, pick a date, let people know what that date's going to be, and start administering on that date. A third question that I should probably mention is, some employers are skeptical, and some employers really do want documentation. And the question that we get a lot is, what am I entitled to get from a working parent before I allow these benefits? And it's a very low bar. So you get to know the name and age of the child, you get to know where the child is in school or who the child's healthcare provider is, and you get a bare statement that the child care arrangement is not available because of a COVID-related reason. And you don't really get to do some sleuthing at that point. You take that information, you take the employee at their word, and you move forward and administer benefits on that basis.
That is very helpful, and I think you have put some really complex problems in really practical. So thank you for being willing to talk with us today. Thank you to everybody for all your time and your expertise and your commitment to the kids in our community right now. It's such an unprecedented time, but I think we all feel better having gotten to talk with you all about it a little bit and know how much of yourself you're putting into this work right now. Thank you. We have another really important chamber event that has to do with some of these similar topics coming up. So I want to make sure that everybody has the information for it. We'll send out the recording of today's meeting on Monday, so feel free to share that with anyone that you think could benefit from this information. But on Wednesday, August the 12th, from noon to 1:30, we'll feature our annual State of the Schools event. And you can imagine that both the K through 12 panel and the higher ed panel are going to focus on a lot of these same issues. We're also featuring Google's education evangelist Jamie Cassip on this meeting this year, and his expertise is really in online education. So I think it's very timely. You would find it really beneficial if you're interested in these issues to come to State of the Schools on August 12th. It's $25 for chamber members and $40 for non-members. You can get it on the events page of the Chamber's website. Another Chamber event coming up in the next week that's going to be really meaningful and good is our Chamber Forum this month on Wednesday, August 19th. Will pertain to the restaurant and retail industries and how they are weathering the COVID-19 storm. We'll have experts Rachel Koch, founder of 84 Hospitality, Kirk Purnell, General Manager of N.E. Keith Foods, and Jeanette Smith, General Manager of the OKC Outlets, to talk to us about what's going on in their business areas. Tickets for that are $15 for chamber members and $25 for non-members. And then we're going to do Enlighten again on September the 11th. We haven't established what that topic will be, but if you've been coming to these for some weeks, you know that we've been trying to be really current and really relevant and provide both our members and also friends and partners in the community who aren't members with important and helpful information. And I hope everybody's finding value in that and sharing that value with others. Thank you again to Mass Mutual Oklahoma for helping to host Enlighten, even as it transitioned into this online format. Thanks to everybody here for your time. Today's meeting's adjourned. Bye, everybody. It was good to see so many. Thank you, superintendents. Oh, we're amazing.